There's a lot of very dedicated people.
I think you just hinted at one of the easiest analogies. Who's at the table?
Like my dad said, log and always be worth more than you're being paid.
We're gonna have 30,000 more people here in the next 10, 12 years.
I am optimistic that we'll continue moving in the right direction.
And that takes finding people that wake up every day and they're thankful and they believe they can change the world.
This BendBeat discussion is brought to you by the Ladd Group, Ben's leading real estate team.
Here we are for the next episode of BendBeat. We're joined by Zak Boone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last number of years, primarily through Bend 101.
Right.
That was my introduction to you, and then now we're on the chamber board together.
Correct.
And I would like to have everyone had a chance to get to know you a little bit, because I think that's what this is about, understanding the people, the passionate people that are trying to make Bend and Central Oregon a beautiful place. Your role is Vice President of College Advancement at Central Oregon Community College and help me out here.
Executive Director of the COCC Foundation.
Okay, explain to me what those roles are.
Yeah, so advancement is this fancy term in higher ed that sort of tries to encompass all external relations that are non-academic.
Okay.
Media, marketing, web, grants, legislative affairs, publications.
Yep.
So that's sort of the storytelling, the branding component of the college, right?
Okay.
You see a billboard, you see a press release, you think of an event at the college, all of that is in advancement. Our website, the cocc.edu site.
Yep.
When we do print posters for our programs or some of the Chandler Lecture Series events, you see the product, COCC Magazine, which goes out to our entire district. So that's advancement, that's the term in higher ed.
Yep.
So I oversee that division, and also the college, just like every community college in Oregon, has a 501c3, the COCC Foundation.
So that's the COCC
Correct.
Foundation.
So that's the separate entity that
so that's a nonprofit foundation, and what is the role of that foundation?
To support the college. The mission is very simple, and this is true whether it's the U of O Foundation or the Portland State Foundation or the Chemeketa Foundation, right? Which is the C3 is set up as the fundraising arm to enhance the institution. Capital projects, for us it's scholarships, capital improvements, and program support. So the philanthropic arm of the institution runs through the C3. And that's what I was originally hired for. I was the director of the foundation. And then we did a little bit of a reorg in 2020. Created this advancement division, kind of put several different areas into that one new division. And I was kind enough to be asked to lead that now new division, in addition to continuing to serve as the director of the foundation.
Okay, so that's really cool. So now let's take a step back a little bit. How did you end up in Bend? And what's your Central Oregon story?
Yeah, I married a Bend girl, so there it is.
There you go.
Grew up in Portland.
Yep.
And met my wife at the girlfriend, then wife at the time, at Lewis and Clark.
Yep.
Went to grad school in nonprofit management. It's a long story of how I ended up in that program. So I have a master's degree in public administration and nonprofit management. Really found the philanthropic sector to be where it was really my jam early on. I moved to DC thinking I might move overseas, and started working for a small nonprofit in DC and was like, oh, this is it. Then went to grad school, we moved back to Portland, was kind enough to be offered the job as the director of the Ronald McDonald House, interviewed for that in 2007. I had been working
here in Bend?
Correct, I'd been working at Portland State. Had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. My wife was in grad school, and this opportunity came up and kind of changed our life, and decided we'd give it a run. Try to come back to Bend. My wife's, high school town, if you will. We thought we'd give it 2 years. This was in 2007.
Yeah.
Loved the job.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, we were here about 3 months, and we were up at Elk Lake, and my 5-year-old was on the beach playing, and my 1-year-old is on the little beach playing, that day use area.
Yeah.
And my wife leans over and she says, honey, and she goes, we're never going back to the valley, which we haven't. So, but I love it here. So that was how we got back to Bend and for me to Bend at the first time. And what a great gig, the Ronald McDonald House. I still am involved a little bit with that organization. And so then really plugging into the sort of philanthropic ecosystem here in Central Oregon, that was 2007.
Well, it gives me chills every time people talk about the philanthropic network and all the amazing people like you that are passionately embedded and ingrained in believers in our community. And it's refreshing, and I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that are newer to here and move to Bend for lifestyle. It's kind of an REI catalog to them, and I think it's important to understand kind of the depth and breadth of all the people that are making our community a better place and all the challenges that we face, right?
And there are many, There, I hear, Brian, some folks say there are too many nonprofits in insert jurisdiction.
Okay.
And what I always say to folks is, my understanding of nonprofit work is a little different, right?
Yeah.
Where nonprofits are private corporations.
Yeah.
Some of them are small, one drawer, one person, one
Yeah.
grant. But if you're not meeting your mission and doing your work, you're either going to be dormant or you're going to fall away, just like any
Yeah.
private business. So when I hear too many nonprofits, I always ask are you talking about duplication of services? Are you talking about community need?
Yeah.
Do people want to see us collaborate? I think it's a very collaborative
I think we
atmosphere.
should wear that badge.
I don't think it's the
Too many nonprofits.
I agree. I think that's the way our society is set up, right?
Yeah.
If the government sector or the private sector aren't addressing the need, the nonprofit sector steps in.
Yeah.
To be very simplistic about it. But that always tells me when people say there are too many. Well, if you strip away homeowners associations and religious organizations, per capita there aren't too many. There aren't as many. That inflates the number a little bit.
Do we have an approximation of how many that is?
I couldn't tell you right now.
Yeah,
Couple hundred.
offhand,
Couple
it's-
hundred.
yeah,
Well, in
it's
our
a couple
Central
hundred,
Oregon
yeah.
Madras to Chemolt, or are we just
Yeah.
talking about Bend?
Yeah.
So, but there are quite a few, and I think the fair question is, are there overlapping services?
Yeah.
Are there areas where nonprofits can really collaborate for community need? If there's another foundation raising
Yeah.
scholarship money for a community college in Bend, imagine, that would be an overlap.
Yeah.
There's only one. I only know of one Kids Center. I only know of one Ronald McDonald House.
Yeah.
I only know of one Saving Grace, right? So those are the things where there's some community organizations who really fill a need, and without them, it'd be hard to think about our community without them. So
Yeah, I think they're mission critical to who we are as a community. And I think when I hear the word nonprofit, I approach it from a very different angle of saying, what about our community encourages people to create and support these nonprofits?
Yeah.
Because I think, there's a sense of empowerment, or maybe not empowerment is the term, but onus on the people, that when people see a need here, they get involved to fix it.
Yeah.
And when you come from bigger communities and bigger cities up and down the West Coast or wherever people come from, they see problems and talk about problems, but here people jump in.
I think that's true.
What about our community kind of empowers these people to get involved and create these nonprofits?
I don't know the answer to that. What I will tell you is I think a little bit of the geographic isolation that, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? When you talk to folks that have been in Bend a long time, what was it? You weren't relying on folks from the valley, right? This town you had to kind of take care.
There's no one else to point to.
Yeah, and you took care of one another, I think, in a different way, and I think you can probably see examples of that around the country. I think there's also a little bit of we can do this. We pull ourselves out by our bootstraps. We don't need help from Portland, Eugene, Salem, right? So there's a little of that. But I do think when you create a culture of giving and a culture of engagement, that was there. When we talk about this at the foundation all the time.
Yeah.
That we're the oldest community college foundation in Oregon.
Yeah.
The first gift that came in was from the Miller family. $500 scholarship support because they wanted students to go to school, and they knew that there were a lot of folks here that were under-resourced.
Yeah.
Off and running. Now we have the largest endowment of any community college in 3 states because that philanthropic intent started right away. So now my job is to make sure that people keep that spirit. Why that's true as sort of the fabric of the community, I think it's a lot of those reasons of being isolated and people wanting to give, and then now it's become an expectation.
Yeah.
So when I started the job at the college, I had a board member. And he told me that everybody knew he meets in Central Oregon. He's from Portland also originally. He says, welcome to Bend, what are you doing to get involved? And now I do that. It's not a challenge.
Welcome to Bend,
what are you doing to get involved? Because the people move here, if they're not from here, they move here because something caught them. It might be the mountains, it might be the kayak, it might be the skiing, it might be the mountain biking, or it might just be this community we have. So if that's the case, if a little bit of that is that people are really interested in leaning in, then my challenge for folks is whether it's volunteerism, whether it's making a donation, whether it's just getting out and supporting your neighbors. Welcome to this community. We're so excited to have you. Everybody's from somewhere. But what are you doing to get involved? And not to tell them what that is. There's a huge menu. Back to are there too many nonprofits? Well, I think that actually creates a great menu for folks to say, hey, I'd like to do this. And something about that has held in this community, and it is different. I talk to folks around the country. I go back to my mom's in Portland, and that magic doesn't quite exist in the same way that it does in Central Oregon, at least to my perspective.
Yeah, and I hope that flame doesn't extinguish, or because there's still a belief that you can make a difference here.
Yeah.
And I'm just, fearful that we start to lose that, and disassociate from that responsibility. What I do find is that when people are here a couple years, sometimes if they haven't gotten involved in the community and haven't, put their energy or resources, either financial or time, to use, if they have that capacity in life, if they're at that phase of their career or life and whatnot, and have the ability to do that, they become a little pessimistic about the town without getting involved. And I saw that, we get to that magic 100,000 person for City of Bend alone number, and I think that it would be easy to disassociate, but there's a lot of good people kind of fighting to keep that responsibility on its citizens.
I agree, and I actually think the challenges for two groups, if we're going to use that term, folks that have been here a long time, that feel like they've been sort of, this wave has come over them of population growth or all these folks. I
didn't ask.
And even if they're sort of, some people get grumpy about that. I understand that. That's true anywhere. Like, no, I don't want anyone else in this town. Well, those folks I do think about, like people that have been in Bend a long time. That overwhelming feeling, I want them to feel just as excited and to get involved too. And then for folks that are working remotely, I just heard the EDCO stat at the annual meeting last week about this is still the number of people in Deschutes County that are working remotely with 28%. It's very high.
Wow.
So if you're working remotely and maybe you don't have a culture or community in your office, or like I get to work at the college, it's a vibrant place. Some of my best friends work with me, right? How do we create opportunities for folks that are working remotely, maybe at one of the work share areas or even in their home, to then come out into the community and be a part of that? So I do think about those two constituencies. People have been here a long time and maybe feel overwhelmed, like, how do I get involved? Now I barely recognize my town. And then people that are brand new, but they're plugged into their work for another company elsewhere to get them engaged in the community.
Brian Ladd here. I appreciate you listening. This BendBeat podcast is proudly produced and brought to you by the Ladd Group at Cascade Hassan Sotheby's International Realty. We at the Ladd Group believe that real estate is more than just homes. It's about our community. We're deeply committed to making Bend a better place, and we dedicate ourselves to serving our home buyers and our home sellers at the absolute highest levels of our industry. You can learn more at bendpropertiesource.com, or you can always give us a call. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
There's so many different paths we could go with that conversation, and I think for me, for anyone that feels a little bit on the outside of kind of the community, all I can encourage them to do is get involved in anything. We have so many things, like you can get jaded about the crowds and whatnot, and how things have changed and housing prices, and there's a million things, and those are all very legitimate. But every time I've gotten involved, whether it be with housing or whether it be let's call it lifestyle, Oregon Adaptive Sports up on the mountain. As soon as you start getting involved, the switch immediately flips for me to, I'm grateful and humbled that there's these people doing all this good work, and it completely shifts my mentality.
I think that's well said. Yeah, it's like traffic.
Yeah.
When you're in traffic, you're like, oh, the traffic, but you're like, wait, I am the traffic.
Yeah.
Right. To me, it's that perspective shift.
Yeah, and you can go up to Mount Bachelor and complain about the crowds, but then you go into the rooms under, the rooms under the building over at Sunrise Village, and you see all the amazing people at Oregon Adaptive Sports trying to give these people their first experience on skis, and you just get emotional, and you're like, heck yeah, this is, let's rally.
Well, I think that same self-recognition that hopefully is there, that it's so crowded at Bachelor, as I stand at Bachelor being part of the crowd, is also the mindset that, hey, look at this community of people who want to do this really cool thing that I'm surrounded by. Now, again, easy to say for me, but that's where I try to, even when I have my moments of and I grew up in Portland, so I've seen, I go back to the neighborhood I grew up in. Portland blew up too, right?
Yeah.
So trying to understand that those folks are there for some of the same reasons I am, or just find that community within.
Yeah.
And it does help me shift my perspective and not make it feel like it's overwhelming or too crowded.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more specifically about higher education.
Yeah.
COCC, because COCC was one of those, it's absolutely mission critical to Bend. And our community, and it's one of those things that I probably underappreciated for my first 5 or 10 years here, and then you start to realize that it has its fingers in almost everybody's lifestyle, either as someone who retired from their job and now they're teaching as a professor, or they're taking continuing ed in the evenings, or their students are taking half their classes over at Bend High and half their classes at COCC, like my daughter. It has its fingers in so many parts of our community, and I realized it is absolutely a defining pillar of what Bend is, and its impact on Bend cannot be overstated. And so I guess I'd love to hear from you is, what is COCC's role? How do you see COCC's role within our community?
Yeah, it's integral to everything, and now it's 4 communities: Bend, Redmond, Madras, and Prineville.
Bend, Redmond, Prineville,
and Madras.
And Madras. You've got 4 campuses.
Correct, and we're expanding in Madras. Or community colleges in Oregon are defined by districts.
Okay.
So all 17 community colleges in Oregon have a geographic district that supports them. That's the tax base. If you own property in that district, you then support your local community college through property taxes. Central Oregon Community College District is massive.
Yep.
It's larger than 8 states. So think about that range, right? That's our service area. But 75 years, we just had our 75th anniversary this past year. It is hard to explain. And back to what I was saying earlier about Bend being so isolated, especially think about the 50s, 60s, 70s. That was the only higher ed game, not only in town, but for this whole area. Yes, we have stuff in Baker and LeGrand, but in terms of where a lot of people were coming and congregating in Central Oregon, COCC was the only game in town for higher ed. So you see then this really, and it's still been, people are still coming here because of some of the reasons we still come here. Yeah. So there was a president at COCC, Fred Boyle, who really wanted it to be the Harvard of community colleges, the Harvard of the West. So he wanted PhD faculty at COCC. He wanted this community college to be, the bee's knees, if you will. And that's been the culture. Yeah. So we started to attract over all these years really high quality faculty. Why wouldn't they want to be in Bend? Yep. It becomes not only a draw for Central Oregonians, but it has a little bit of a draw that most community colleges don't have, because again, people wanted to be in Bend. Yep. And then all of the community ed and learning, and used to be much more arts focused. There were, a lot of things, the Pinckney Center, so a lot of cultural events that took place in Bend happened on COCC's campus. There just weren't other spaces for it. The arts community wasn't as flushed out. So you bring that all forward to today, and especially with sort of the value proposition of 4-year schools and higher ed and the conversation that's going on. Yeah. And I think the time is right for community colleges to really, again, take that next step and shine. I love it. I drink the Kool-Aid all the time. I always say I'm very bullish on COCC's future, even though we've had such a bright past. So the fact that you have been here and all of a sudden seeing all these tentacles. It's wild. So the other thing about this advancement that I talked about in my job is telling our story and letting people know how important the college is. That's not a common tactic for community colleges, right? We're not very good at saying, hey, we're pretty cool, you should check us out. Yep. You just kind of do the work, if you will. It's not martyrdom, but it's like this community colleges, 2-year institutions, we're really trying to educate, but also prepare. So many students would come and get that 2-year degree and want to head off to a 4-year institution. That's a lot of how community colleges in Oregon are built. Yeah. COCC was always a bit of a hybrid, because we had all these career and technical ed programs. Yep. Let's 2-year degree and let's get you employed. Yeah. And now we're seeing that's where our clients, that's where our students want us, is in those programs. That's where we're seeing growth. That's where we're seeing activity. And students are looking at, okay, maybe I do want to go to a 4-year school. We still have that. It's a robust transfer program. But our growth is in those career and technical ed programs the last few years, and we're moving in that direction.
What's 1 or 2 examples of that, where you've seen a lot of growth and success and desire and demand from the students?
Yeah, vet tech.
Vet tech.
Okay. Manufacturing, automotive, I can go on and on. Nursing is one that has had a really great history at COCC. Our nursing program is nationally renowned. As a wait list, it's really tough to get into. But there's a great example of coming high quality faculty, getting that 2-year degree and going right into the workforce. Yeah. I use the term higher education that gets you hired. Yeah. If you want to work and you want to have a family wage job, a community college education is still the quickest way to do that. It's the #1 way to break the cycle of poverty in this country. There's data, robust data, that shows a 2-year degree from a community college will change the trajectory of a family's life economically. And that's proven out student after student after student.
Well, let's talk about accessibility of that and its relation to the foundation. Yeah. So for someone, do you have any stories that can help us kind of to envision what you're talking about as far as the accessibility of all these different programming for people either that are working or still in high school? And, because I know a lot of the high school students are now coming out with an associate's degree.
Correct.
You know, and your cooperation with the schools. I guess maybe if you could give one or two examples of like how it's that accessibility and the programming of COCC has allowed people to make advancements in their life, and without COCC, there would have been a hard ceiling.
I think that's a great question. So the first is that our College Now program, which allows students in high school to take concurrent classes at the college for college credit.
Yep.
These are students who usually have they have a future, they see their future in education a little bit. Okay, I want to make sure I'm getting college credit.
Yeah.
So you pay then your local community college tuition rate rather than what you would pay at University of Oregon, CU, other places. And so those articulation agreements then allow, when they have that degree or those transcripts, to transfer them to any school in Oregon, any four-year school in Oregon. It's just, here's my COCC transcript.
Yeah.
And I did it while I was in high school. I learned from great faculty. It was in my community, and now I have these credits that I don't have to pay for at the four-year rate.
Yeah.
So that creates a lot of accessibility for our high school students.
Yeah, a lot of our high school students are transferring into other schools as sophomores, juniors,
correct,
right?
Correct. Or even if it's just that math class that they didn't have to take with 280 students at Portland State or whatever. There are many examples of that. So that's one slice, the College Now program. And we have high school partnerships across the region to just also create a culture of college going, right? So many of our students, Brian, are first generation. Their parents or grandparents didn't go to college.
Yep.
So if you're first generation, it can be a little daunting, even to show up on a community college campus, financial aid, registration, there's just not a culture in one's family for so many folks. So that allowing that to come about on the high school is one way we do that. Another great example of that is some of the programs we do for our underserved communities. We have, there's a lot of talk about equity and DEI programs in higher ed. We at COCC look at equity as, let's be student ready for any student in our region who wants to be here.
Student ready for any student in our region.
We talk about being a student ready institution. So when you show
get
up,
rid of all the barriers to anyone who wants to participate.
Correct. So you might have different needs, Brian, as a student who shows up.
Yep.
You may be first generation, you may come from an underserved community, you may be a veteran. So we look at Brian and say, what does Brian have, and try to have supports in place then to support you and every one of those students. That's lowercase equity that we talk about, which is making sure we can provide for students that are under-resourced. The Foundation Scholarship Program, that would be another access point, right? So we offer the most robust scholarship program of any community college in Oregon. That's not saying we blame students for not having resources to pay for education. We say, hey, if you have need financially and you qualify, we're gonna bring you in. We wanna get you an education. So I guess my answer is that we try to find every single way we can. If a student says, hey, I'm interested in a community college, we're gonna make that work for them. We're gonna provide supports for them, because ultimately the goal isn't to get them in the door, it's actually to get them out the door, right? It's to get them out the door with a certificate or a degree onto their next thing. Educated from COCC, but that's what we try to do. Be open access, be student ready, and let everyone who has an interest in pursuing or improving their life through education do so. So to me, that's the ultimate in sort of an equity lens, because every student has different needs. Some have none. They show up, they're ready to go, they're 32, they already did a community college thing, they know what they want. Some don't have that, and it's everywhere in between. We have the highest number of veteran students of any community college in Oregon, right? There's a line in financial aid that is specifically set up for our veteran students so that they don't have to wait if they come and have questions about financial aid, right? We feel like that's our duty. It's a little thank you for your service. Does that discriminate against other students who can't get that line? I don't think so. I want to make sure, but those are the kinds of things that we do those things for student groups in all different ways. LGBTQ students from the Warm Springs community, our Latino students, our first generation students, our rural students from Burns. We try to make sure we have programs in place to make sure that they are successful, they stay, and that they leave COCC better off and better prepared for what's next for them.
So in my mind, the hurdles with with universities and the barrier to entry and the minimum of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year and whatnot, and the student loans and the private student loans, my mind's just pessimistic. But this sounds gosh darn optimistic.
Well, I'm a bit of an optimist but I get to see every year thousands, hundreds, and sometimes thousands of students who graduate or who leave, and sometimes it's just a one-year certificate, right? They want to come in and get a certificate in automotive to be able to work on electric vehicles, for example. So they've worked in the industry, they come out. How cool is that, right? They've just now increased their skill set and also their potential for pay by that 1-year certificate. So I get to see all of those stories, and we give out 400 or 500 scholarships every year to students. Every single one of them writes a thank you letter. You have a bad day in my office, you just read 2 or 3 thank you letters from students about how they're so, just thankful that someone's invested in them.
Yeah.
It's just really humbling work. So I stay optimistic because I've seen this generational change, and I don't think Central Oregon, to your earlier question, would be the same without the hundreds of thousands of folks whose lives have been touched over 75 years by the college.
Do you feel that the COCC's model, or community college model in general, is more responsive to the changing dynamics of our workforce, our job demand, the jobs that are in the community, how they've changed with AI, with the barriers to entry to big public universities? Do you think that you've been able to more quickly respond to kind of the changing needs of both the workforce and the students?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We try to be.
Yeah.
We're still a state agency and a pretty big bureaucracy, candidly. I mean, these are big ships to turn.
Yeah.
And let's say you start a program in English that's been around 70 years, and all of a sudden your enrollment in English is declining. Well, but you've got English faculty, you've got a history, so you don't just throw away your English department.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, you want to start a department in construction trades or an ag tech, so trying to be responsive to community need and emerging trends is challenging because we also have to still meet the obligations we've made over time in other disciplines.
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty difficult to sunset a program in higher ed in Oregon. That's a whole nother podcast. Really, really boring one. But to your point, we really try to do that, and the way we can do that is through non-credit.
Yep.
So the college, one thing we can do that the four-year schools can is we can offer non-credit classes, right? Continuing ed, adult learning, and see, is there demand for this?
Yep.
Work with industry partners, work with business partners, and then sort of ramp up a program in response to that need.
Yep.
So that's the community college model, is trying to do that and be responsive to community need. We're doing that with our Madras expansion. The programs that are offered in our new Madras campus, 4 discrete programs that were driven by the needs of Jefferson County, community leaders, focus groups, et cetera. We didn't go in and say, hey, these are the programs we think you need.
From
we
the
try
1950s.
So that's part of that, is also listening. What does well in Redmond is different than the Bend campus and is different in the Prineville campus and the Madras campus. Not always, but we try to listen to that community need too.
What are your primary funding mechanisms that create the stability and the platform for doing these types of things, in addition to the foundation?
Yeah, so in Oregon, community college is really the 3-stool of tuition and fees.
Okay.
State aid, so the Community College Support Fund, CCSF, which is part of the governor's budget.
Okay.
And then our property taxes.
Yeah.
So again, as I said earlier, if you own property in COCC's district or in Tillamook Bay's district or Portland Community College district, part of your property tax goes, you'll see it right on your statement, goes to the college. We also have the ability to go out for bonds.
Yeah.
So currently still there is a bond from 2009 that voters passed to fund COCC. Some of our capital improvements.
Okay.
So that would be a 4th leg of funding that we can use. Then private philanthropy and grants, part of the stuff I oversee, really helps us spin up new programs, support students, and then again run the scholarship program. But that's all through the private dollars, the private foundations or private philanthropy.
So it's a reminder that as community citizens, we're paying for COCC. Get involved, use it.
Exactly, which is why with you like Bend 101 or Balloons Over Bend, or we try City Club, chamber events, we try to host as many events as we can because we feel like people should be on their community college's campus. And that's true in Redmond and Prineville and Madras too. Community events, we love to have community events at the college. We just do. Even if you're not a student there, it's a pretty cool campus too. We're pretty lucky to have the Bend campus on Aubrey Butte, the view, it's just a cool place to be. And you get up there and you can't not help but feel that sort of, pulse of a college campus.
Yeah, so you probably have a whole map of the issues and the threats that face your, Central Oregon Community College.
Yep.
If we had to talk about one thing, what keeps you up at night? What's your major point of concern that you would like to kind of put some light on?
That's a great question. I'll punt on kind of the instability in the federal budget these days, because we do rely on federal dollars. All the community colleges do, especially from the Pell Grant, right? A lot of our students, if you are Pell eligible, these are our folks that have the fewest financial resources that want to go to college. The Pell Grant's been around for a long time. Yeah. So the notion that the Pell Grant might go away, that the federal government might take away this really, what I think is a really important spoke in funding for students. There are communities around this country, Brian, especially in some more rural and communities in the central part of the country, the Pell Grant is the lifeblood of that community. No one's going to those community colleges without Pell.
Yeah.
So that worries me a little bit on the federal landscape. The other thing that worries me a little bit is rural resiliency. So when I look at Madras and Prineville, especially where our campuses are, rural resiliency. And I think community colleges, it's part of that conversation about Pell, but what the community college provides in Madras and in Prineville and to some degree Redmond are sort of the lifeblood. This is the community center. This is a point of pride. If you grow up in Madras or Jefferson County, do you really want to come to Bend every day for class?
Is that accessible?
Is that right? Is that feasible? Is that just a dream too far? Childcare, commute, gas. You know what 97 looks like in January between Madras and Bend.
Dangerous.
Don't drive it.
Yeah.
So by investing in that community and our campus there, it is part of our district. I think it really helps with rural resiliency, which is that the investment in that community allows for folks to stay there. It sort of counters that brain drain that the best and brightest in Jefferson County have to go elsewhere for education if you want to stay there. Mm-hmm. And then I think what we see as a result are jobs and people staying home and that's homegrown feeling. So in rural communities, community colleges serve even perhaps a little bit of a larger role even as a community hub and gathering place. During COVID, the COCC computer lab at our Madras campus was the only place in Jefferson County that was open with free Wi-Fi. So imagine in COVID, and rural broadband's a whole other topic. So again, it's a place where people could come, have free Wi-Fi, use our computer lab, even all the way through COVID, whether you were a student or not. Yeah. So that's what I mean, these become community centers almost and gathering places that's more than just the education and the degree. It's a place of building community. I mean, community's in the name, right?
Yeah.
It's a community college. So that worries me a little bit, is making sure that we continue to see these sort of our communities, our rural areas thrive because we have a little bit of that perfect sauce, whatever that is, that the community college provides that we take for granted maybe in Bend and even in Redmond where that's that culture. So, but the federal landscape for funding in higher ed is going through a massive shift. It's a good conversation to have. that doesn't worry me, but I do worry about some of the folks that are that need those resources the most to really improve their lives. And I think that's part of the American dream. Is to say, hey, I really want to improve my life. I just need a tiny bit of a hand up.
Yep.
And Pell does that. Our scholarship program does that. And then 9 times out of 10, those folks are off and running.
So if as a community we want to rally around this and we say, hey, Pell's unreliable, but we still want to make this accessible to everybody, is the foundation step one for people to get involved to help fix that?
I mean, you can. Philanthropy often is. But I also think it's just leaning in and making sure that when you're involved in your community, you support the college. Come to one event a year.
Yeah.
When you're talking to your neighbors or your own kids or your grandkids about their higher ed options, hey, the community college isn't it, oh, you could go to community college. This is a way to change your life and maybe do something that doesn't put you $80,000 in debt.
Yep.
So I think it's just opening up the conversation to say that community colleges are critical in our communities in this country and to really lean back into that.
You're absolutely right, and obviously everyone's experience is different, but I have one visual experience that, my daughter was over at Bend High, and she loves it there, and she does some of the IB programs, but she is kind of doing things a la carte, and she took so she was not quite 16, she was 15 years old. She went and took a course over at Central Oregon Community College in the afternoons, and I caught her, I pulled up and I caught her walking across campus, and she was in a 15-person class with an amazing professor. Her head was held high, and it was absolutely planting the seeds for engaging with the education that you need and want, as opposed to it being programmatic where you're just kind of turned off as a high school student. It's coming at you, you're on a 12-year platform, and then and she was able to make that choice, pick that class, go after school. And the empowerment that I saw in her was incredible. And she was in class with 18, 20, 25, 30-year-olds, and she absolutely loved it and flourished. And to see that empowerment that she found up at your amazing campus was...
Isn't that cool? It's so cool. I know I get to see that every day. The average age of our students is 25 years old. Because of that, we have such a range of learners, and it creates a really rich experience. On the credit and non-credit side, a lot of people will think about the college. You can come take some of our non-credit classes and gardening or beer making or wine tasting or how to use your iPhone or outdoor photography, right? These are not, but the same thing happens. That same magic happens, which is people like to learn.
Yeah.
And whether it's for a degree or just for interest. And so that's another great way that the college touches the community is through all these years of community, it's had different names, community education, community learning, adult learning, that sort of thing. I always tell people, hey, you should check out the cool things that the college offers. Our former president, Shirley Metcalf, she took a class when she was the president, I believe, dean or the president, of how to use your iPhone. And she came to work. Really great class, by the way, because if you're like me, you use like 5% of it. It's kind of like our brains. And she was showing me all these things she'd learned in this class, these features and tricks in her iPhone, and I really was like, what a great thing. And she said the class was full of people from 18 to 80 that took this class. And again, I just think that, and they had fun, they met people, they learned. It's just, that's a tiny bit of a microcosm too of what goes on at the college, credit or non-credit. And I'm glad your daughter's experiencing that. My daughter experienced that. She did her first year at COCC during COVID. It was all online, but she still talks about it. She graduated from Portland State, that her favorite instructors, even without meeting them in person, were her time at COCC.
Well, my son, in lieu of his spring semester of his senior year, he took all college courses up at COCC, and he's taking these amazing business courses with 20 kids in his class, and I was talking to him about the curriculum and what they're talking about and discussing, and I was like, I hate to break it to you, but if you were to take that same course at a large 4-year university, you'd be with 250 kids and a TA is probably teaching it, and like what you're getting here is far superior to anything you could get, out of Bend.
I agree. I agree. And part of that is our faculty. It is hard to explain to people the quality of our faculty. If you're going to teach at a community college, this is not a slight on any other profession or any other. There's a belief in that mission. There's a magic in that too, that the faculty that teach, especially at COCC, but again, this is community colleges across the country, are really dedicated, committed folks that really, it just are, again, not to rank or prioritize, but I'm blown away by our faculty, adjunct, part-time, full-time, all the time. These people could often be making more if they've come from the private sector, our CTE programs. If you're our aviation instructor who used to have our own flight school, or if you're in culinary, or if you're in automotive, you can make more in the private sector than teaching at community college. This is true in almost every industry. And yet, folks teach at a community college because they love their craft, they love education, they want to pass this on to the next generation, or anyone. And there's something about that magic too that happens, and I'm just blown away by our faculty on the regular.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I can feel that just optimism oozing from you. So, it's hard to ask you a question about anything negative because you always answer it with optimism, and I think that speaks to your mission and who you are. But if you could wave a magic wand and kind of solve one major problem in our community, whether it intersects with COCC or not, what would be that problem to say, hey, we've got a myriad of problems, but like, what would be the one that you just say, hey, this needs to be fixed today at all costs?
I think I'm on the City Club board too, Brian, and I love the forums and the variety of topics we have at City Club. So you've discussed
them all.
I mean, it's hard to pick here's one. When you're in a roundabout, you're supposed to signal out. So that's the me, right? Roundabout, signal out. I love the variety of blinkers that go on in roundabouts. But there's my public service announcement for the podcast. Roundabout, signal out. You don't need to signal in because you're going in. You have to go in. But the people that go with the left blinker, anyway. I think what I would say is, I still worry about access to mental health services is what popped in my brain first. And I think about the loneliness epidemic in our communities. I think about, my wife's a mental health practitioner, so candidly, that's part of why that pops in my mind. My dad really suffered from mental illness most of his life. And having access to mental health services, I think, is just one. There are many things that I would wave that wand on, but that's one that comes to mind because I think there's still stigma, and I still think with the way health insurance and healthcare is run in this country, is really difficult to avail oneself of true mental health services. Chief Krantz came and spoke at my Rotary last week and talked about how much time BendPD, just one group, spends on calls with folks that are in mental distress. So many times, that's that front line, right? there's been an erosion in access to mental health services that have been picked up by some nonprofits, and the county does work, and we have great NAMI is a great organization, and BendPD and Share, but that's a real issue, soup to nuts, from folks that just need therapy to folks that are really in crisis, and making sure we connect them with the services they need. That's one thing I would love to solve, because when people have access to mental health services and just feel better about themselves, the community's safer, families are stronger, all the things, right? So that's one that I would love to figure out how to just make sure everyone who needs those services can get them.
Well, and that one ties into so many other issues that we face.
Houselessness, it does. Trauma, abuse, folks carry that all forward. So that's one that's one that's hard to go positive on too much, other than the amazing people that are doing that work.
There's a lot of people doing that work. I mean, primarily that used to be federal funds that would
state and
that,
federal,
right?
yep.
State and federal, and those have dried up. And I think what we're seeing from houselessness to violence to whatnot is largely a result of that.
And it's hard work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can again, the chief gave some examples, but if you can imagine showing up in a call where someone's in real crisis, mental crisis, the toll that takes on the person showing up, whether they're a caseworker, a social worker, or a police officer, that's just a lot. So how do we then care for the caregivers in that space? That's something we haven't figured out very well in this country. And I think if I'd like to wave that wand, it was that we reduce that stigma, we increase access, and we take away some of the private pay and insurance models that are required to really avail yourselves of those care. When your health insurance is tied to your employment, like it is in this country, boy, mental health, it's just another challenge there.
You know, what's one parting hope that you have for our community?
Yeah, that people continue to stay engaged. I think the issues of the UGB expansion, which gets sort of, wonky, all the way to houselessness, to height requirements on condos, to clean river. If we have to talk about these things. These are not solved by people posting on KTVZ's comment board or just thinking about them. If you
but it's easier to make a comment.
It is, but if you really want to see change and you really want to be part of the process, whatever that is. So I would really hope that the community continues to have difficult conversations together. Community building, growth, the kind of growth we're seeing in Central Oregon and Oregon in general, these are they bring up complicated topics. The more we can talk about them and bring folks to the table, I think it just builds relationships, it builds community, and then we can solve things together. I think the best solutions rarely come out of someone saying, we're gonna do this. Being told what to do turns out doesn't really work all that well, even for a 5-year-old, right? It's easier to help the 5-year-old learn why we should do it rather than tell them to do it. So I would just really like to see the community, continue to create opportunities with the city, the county, city club, chamber, all this right here, that allow people to say, hey, I've got an idea, or I'd like to be a part of the conversation, and create as many opportunities for that as possible.
Well, Zak, I think our community is indebted to people like you that are committed to the current needs and the future of our community, and these are the conversations that fill me back up with optimism and belief that we have a great future, and I do believe that,
I do too, and I appreciate you having that conversation and highlighting and showcasing some of that work, because it's important to so many folks. So
there's a lot of amazing people in this community.
So many.
Many are not very visible. They're just quietly doing the hard work behind the scenes.
Probably most of them. Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people that are just having trouble getting by day by day, and they're doing their best. And I think that we owe it to all of them in the community to pitch in and help.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
Thank you for the conversation today.
Thank you.
I love COCC.
So do I.
And hopefully this can provide a little bit of light on where that magic comes from.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your time.
Wonderful.
This was presented and created by the LAD Group at Cascade Hass and Sotheby's International Realty. Whether you're buying, selling, or simply dreaming about your next chapter, we at the LAD Group are here to guide you. You can visit us anytime at bendpropertysource.com. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.